it's a wonderful time for an evolutionary biologist because of the new molecular techniques. There's new information that's coming out almost daily, and it's all on our side. We were right, they are wrong. And anybody who denies that is either a slimy leftist Marxist or a complete idiot.
Hey, it's Kylie with Punks for Progress. This video, we're going to talk about the field of genetics and racism. As you heard, the white supremacists think that science is on their side, but it's not. We're going to talk about that in this video. I'm going to go over some basic beliefs on both sides of the argument of modern racism. We'll get a little background also in genetics if you need a little refresher. And then we will talk about the importance of going to the source of when you do hear data that sounds like it supports racism, go to the source. Then we're going to go over a couple studies together so you know how to digest them. All right, here we go.
Somebody take your time. Making worries of the words that you couldn't say. They could have saved them from.
So I want to start with the article, or rather the headline that caught my attention and inspired the making of this video. Why White Supremacists Are Chugging Milk and Why Geneticists Are Alarmed by Amy Harmon last month in the New York Times. Now this piece is a reactionary piece to an article that was published earlier this year by David Reich, who is a professor of genetics at Harvard University. That article is entitled, How Genetics is Changing Our Understanding of Race. It's a great article. I encourage all of you to read it. But one of the things he says in that article is that the left is mostly silent on the new findings coming out of the field of genetics. And what the white supremacists are doing are taking advantage of that silence, taking the studies, twisting them for their own agenda, and taking over the conversation about genetics and how it's in support of racism and their propaganda. So he's calling on the left to be more comfortable talking about genetics, modern genetics. So this video is my attempt at that. I feel like Punks for Progress has made a great environment for the left to have conversations with the left, to sharpen ideas, to get new ideas, inspire each other. So I hope this video does just that and we can both learn something. I won't keep you in suspense. I will tell you why white supremacists are chugging milk. They claim that in the last few years a study has been released that shows Europeans and Americans with European ancestry have the ability to digest milk in adulthood more than any other population in the world. It has to do with the enzyme lactase, which your stomach uses to digest milk. In infancy, everyone across the globe is born with that, so they can digest their mother's milk. But as someone grows up, they don't need that necessarily, and their ability to digest milk decreases. Now, apparently, with Europeans and Americans with European ancestry, a mutation has survived that they can digest milk in adulthood. And it has to do with the ancestors being cattle breeders and needing to digest milk in order to survive. So they have taken claim to that and are boasting that all over. So are white supremacists actually chugging milk? There's only one video on the internet that I could find. So here it is. It's offensive. I'm sorry. White supremacy is offensive, but here it is.
This cold glass of pure racism. Get it down, you. You look like you could use some help. Hashtag testosterone poisoning. Oh no! Alien non-white. I can do this and you can't. So good. Yeah, but we're not getting. That's right, bitch. That's right, bitch.
No one has
Monster faggot. more hung than the average black guy because milk builds strong bones. Oh man, you're bored of it.
So apparently this gathering took place in front of a camera that was set up to be a continuous live stream, kind of an artistic project to promote unity. But these people found out where the camera was, got in front of it, and decided to display their opinions and antics. Not only was their rhetoric racist, it was also anti-vegan.
Down with the vegan agenda.
And anti-anyone who doesn't weightlift.
Oh, I don't care if you can read. I want to know if you can deadlift or 315. Reading is not as important as deadlifting. No, if you can't deadlift 3 plates, don't ask me. 3 plates? You can fucking stop. What are you, some kind of fucking rock? Yeah, if you can't deadlift 4 plates, you're shit. Deadlift 4 plates. Fuck you. 4 plates? Or no, I don't know you. 4 plates are done. Behead those who do not deadlift 4 plates. Milk nationalism, no.
I think that Stephen Colbert has said it best.
Because for white supremacists, lactose is their only form of tolerance.
So let's move forward. Next, I want to establish some basic beliefs on both sides of the argument of modern racism. But in doing so, I do not want to assign or ascribe any beliefs based on political party or where your other beliefs may fall on a spectrum. So instead of using words like the left and the right, liberals and conservatives, Republicans and Democrats, I'm going to create 2 groups, Group A and Group B. We'll define them and then I can refer to them throughout the video. So Group A. If you are in Group A, you probably agree with the following statements. 1. Race is a social construct. What is a social construct? Something that would not exist and definitely not have significance without human interaction. So things like borders, money, government. Secondly, there is no universal definition of race. Being black in America is something different than being black in Brazil or even black in East Africa. So if there's no universal definition, how can it be any basis of any physical evidence in physical science? Thirdly, race is something we self-identify with. If you think about when you go to the doctor's office, when you go to get an identification, you check your own box. So if it's something we self-identify with, how can it be the basis, again, of physical science? So Group B. Group B is going to be our white supremacists, our bigots, our racists, those who believe that races need to be separated in order to survive. They believe there's no such thing as equality and there's no point in pursuing it because races are not equal. They also believe that race is based in science. This is called race realism, and you can Google that on your own, but that science supports their beliefs. And where I'm getting a lot of this rhetoric is from a YouTube channel called American Renaissance. It's actually a media outlet for white supremacists, founded by Jared Taylor, who's written some disgusting books. And their go-to biologist, his name is Douglas Whitman, and he's the man you saw in the introduction of this video. And what he claims is that races are the subspecies of Homo sapiens. Now he says across the globe, all organisms have subspecies. But these subspecies would never interbreed, let alone ever see each other due to geographical isolation and also genetic mutations that have been selected so that they can survive in their individual environments. I don't know if that's true or not, but Douglas Whitman wants to pull that law of nature and apply it to Homo sapiens subspecies, which he claims are races, and say that we should have never interbreeded, we should have never even seen each other, and we need to go back to the way things were, geographical isolation, so that we can mutate to better suit our environment to survive. So there we go, Group A and Group B. But we're here to talk about genetics. So I'm going to have you watch a short video about the basics of genetics. It's the shortest and simplest I could find on YouTube, so I hope you can endure.
Genes, DNA, and chromosomes are what make you who you are. They are the set of instructions that are given to you by your father and mother. These instructions are in your cells, and all living organisms are composed of cells. There are many different types, like nerve cells and hair cells and skin cells. They all have different shapes and forms, but every cell has the same basic parts. The cell has an outer border called the membrane, which contains a liquid material called cytoplasm. In the cytoplasm is the nucleus, and inside the nucleus are chromosomes. In humans, each cell normally contains 23 pairs of chromosomes, for a total of 46. 22 of these pairs, called autosomes, look the same in both males and females. The 23rd pair, the sex chromosomes, differ between males and females. Females have 2 copies of the X chromosome, while males have one X and one Y chromosome. The chromosomes are really long strings of DNA, deoxyribonucleic acid. DNA is shaped like a ladder that's been twisted. This shape is called a double helix. The steps of the ladder are made of 4 bases. Adenine is A, thymine is T, guanine is G, and cytosine is C. A stretch of the DNA is called a gene. Your body reads the genes and the letters like a recipe and builds protein. The order of the bases in the DNA, along with the length and sequence of the gene, determines the size and shape of the protein it builds. The size and shape of the protein determine the function it will have in your body. Proteins make up cells, cells make up tissue, and tissue makes up organs, like your eyes and your skin. So the genes determine what you are, a cow, an apple, or a human, and what you will look like, the color of your hair, your skin, your eyes, and so on.
Pretty fucking cool, right? So I believe that where this video stops is as far as Group A is willing to go with the field of genetics. That yes, there's a genetic reason why you look the way you do. There's a genetic reason for your physical attributes. Now, while there may be a genetic reason for your cognitive and behavioral attributes, things like environment are going to overpower, overrun, override any genetic predisposition you may have to cognitive and behavioral traits. For example, oppression, the school system you grew up in, were your parents married or divorced, were your parents rich or poor. These types of things are going to determine your cognitive and behavioral outcome more than any type of genetic makeup will. So people in Group A may think there's no point in studying genetics with regards to cognitive and behavioral outcomes. Now, people in Group B, they want a scientific basis for cognitive and behavioral outcomes. They believe environmental factors like oppression and salary and family stability, these things are excuses. They want to prove that in the DNA of people, there are reasons some are just better than others, and they want to group the better ones together and create a hierarchy. This is their agenda. And as you heard in the introduction of this video, they believe science is on their side. Now, what's happening, according to the articles that I talked about in the beginning of the video, is people in Group A, because they're not talking about the recent findings in the field of genetics with regards to cognitive and behavioral traits, Group B is overpowering the conversation and twisting the words, twisting the findings to promote their agenda, to promote racism. Now, my best advice to you to combat this is to go to the source. Look at the studies that are being referenced that supposedly support racism. For example, in the beginning, we talked about how there is supposedly a study that supports that only Europeans can digest milk in adulthood. When I went to the internet to look into that, guess what article popped up? Genetic diversity of lactase persistence in East African populations. People in East Africa have lactase through adulthood. They can digest milk through adulthood. The study acknowledges that Europeans can digest milk in adulthood, but they found genetic mutations in the populations of East Africa that allow them to do that as well. So just that little bit of effort debunks what these white supremacists are partying about.
You got it all, you got it all, you got it all, but you got it all wrong.
So I want to walk through another research article with you guys to make sure you know what to look for to verify that an article is legitimate. And when I say article, I mean a published research article. I don't mean an opinion article in Teen Vogue. A published research article is going to have some physical attributes that you can point out without even reading the article to make sure it's legitimate. So first of all, it's going to have a DOI, which is a number and letter sequence that gives it an identification. And it basically means it's been archived. If you put that number in any database, this is the research article that will pop up. So that can prove legitimacy. Secondly, you want to look for what journal was the article published in. Was it published in White Supremacy Weekly, or was it published in the Journal of Modern Medicine? So for my East African populations article, it was published in BMC Research Notes. And it has that DOI up there. So for this article, we're going to scroll through together. I've blacked out the title because it's got some scientific words in it that are way over my head. But we can point out some physical attributes to show its legitimacy. Again, that DOI. And then we have the journal it was published in. This one is Nature Genetics. Now, as we scroll through, we should find subsections. This should be an introduction, a background, a methods, a results subsection, and hopefully a discussion at the end. Now, in my experience, no matter how scientifically complicated the study is, the introduction and the discussion at the end are mostly understandable to a lay person. So it's definitely important to read those or attempt to read them instead of just taking what the title is telling you. So next, let's take a look at our title. Gene Discovery and Polygenic Prediction from a Genome-Wide Association Study of Educational Attainment in 1.1 million individuals. So gene discovery and educational attainment are in the same title of a research article. That is going to scare anyone in Group A. Group B is loving it so far. They want a scientific reason why some people are just better than others. So, like I said, this title is scary. But there's a couple things I can pull from it already. That it's an association study. It's not an experimental study. Association study means they were looking for associations in the data that they gathered. So they gathered a bunch of data, threw it on some charts, and tried to look for relationships. So it's an association study, as opposed to experimental study, which specifically in genetics is going to be that they isolate a gene, mutate it, replicate it in offspring, and then see if they truly isolated the gene. A little bit more reliable. Now that type of study is going on, those types of studies are going on in fish and in mice and rats. I don't think they're going on in humans, maybe. I don't know. Okay, also in the title, there's 1.1 million individuals in this study. That sounds like a lot. Is it a lot? So it's important to know the study that anybody's referencing. How big was the population that was studied? Were 10 people surveyed or were 10 million people surveyed? Obviously, the bigger your sample size, the more reliable the results. So like I said, you're going to want to try to read the introduction, the background, and the discussion. This is going to hopefully give you a little insight, a little bit more as to what the study found as opposed to the title. So I have scrolled through the introduction. It is hefty with a lot of scientific words, but I do want to read the last few sentences together. A joint multi-phenotype analysis of educational attainment and 3 related cognitive phenotypes generates polygenic scores that explain 11 to 13% of the variance in education attainment and 7 to 10% of the variance in cognitive performance. This prediction accuracy substantially increases the utility of polygenic scores as tools in research. Like I said, a lot of scientific words. But I can extrapolate a little bit of information from that. That after they collected their data, they came up with an algorithm, or they isolated similar genes in some people that was able to predict the educational attainment of those people with an accuracy of 11 to 13%. I think. Is that good? Is that bad? Is that a step forward? Is that a step back? You can see how this fact or this claim that they make can be twisted to fit any agenda, including a racist, white supremacist agenda. They'll say, look at this, they were able to predict education level. That's amazing. And now we'll be able to predict education level in different races, and now we can know not to put any effort into equality in the education system. Group A, we need to be smarter. We need to do what we just did to any article we're presented with. Make sure it's in a legitimate journal. Make sure it's been archived. Make sure it has a substantial sample size. And also, what is it actually claiming? Like here, 10% accuracy in the ability to predict education level. And this was probably a retrospective study. So the people involved and studied had already attained that level. They didn't manipulate anything. So environmental factors definitely played a role in their educational attainment. But they were trying to find some data. And it's okay. People are going to study everything and try to find correlations with anything. Let me tell you an example. I know of a professor abroad who spent his PhD years studying and publishing research on the ability of soccer players to score goals during games. PhD level. Good for him. I say that because, like I said, people are going to study and gather data and spend their lifetimes trying to make baby steps in a science. And good for them if they have the drive to do that. We need to not be afraid of what's being presented to us. We need to trust our own instincts, trust the knowledge that we already have to find truth. So lastly, I want to show you a video. It's actually correlation versus causation, which is also a great concept to have a grasp on when you are presented with information. So here it is.
Like most people, I enjoy a tasty scoop of ice cream, especially Oreo blizzards. But what few people realize is how dangerous a treat ice cream has become. First, there's the issue of obesity. Second, there are higher crime rates. Third, there's the loss of life due to a rise in the number of drowning deaths. And finally, as more ice cream is sold, there's an increase in forest fires. Given these indisputable facts, I need you to support my vision of an ice cream-free world. While banning ice cream trucks from entering your neighborhood may sound far-fetched, when it comes to problem solving, a common issue is misunderstanding the difference between correlation and causation. This misunderstanding can influence our decisions, sometimes with serious consequences that ripple throughout a community. Correlation is when two things are related, but one does not cause the other. Usually this means the two are in some way related to a third factor, but not always. If you have a big enough pile of data, you can find plenty of relationships that are purely coincidental, like the strong relationship between the sale of margarine and divorce rates in the state of Maine. With the sale of ice cream, the third factor is weather. When it is hot outside, people buy more ice cream. They are more likely to go for a swim, and there is a general increase in people out and about enjoying the weather, helping improve conditions for crime to take place, as well as the dry conditions associated with forest fires. A note of caution, there is a growing trend in our digital world called data dredging. This is using analytics to sift through mountains of data, hoping to find useful relationships. Instead of a problem in search of a solution, dredging data is a solution looking to find a problem. All of what I've just discussed about correlations does not mean that finding a correlation is without value. In fact, correlations are a vital part of helping us move to the next step, the discovery of causation. Unlike correlation, causation is when you can claim that one thing causes another thing to happen. In order to make this claim, you need to be able to demonstrate an actual cause and effect relationship, preferably a strong relationship. An example most of us are familiar with is the pharmaceutical industry. In order to make the claim that a particular drug causes a certain effect, such as lowering your cholesterol or growing hair, the FDA requires companies support those claims, putting the drug through a 4-phase, 12-step process that takes approximately 12 years. This process uses control groups and clinical trials to test the drug, making sure that X causes Y and that the drug is safe. The acceptable error rate can go as high as 5% for some drugs, meaning that the clinical trials prove that there's a 95% chance the drug does what it claims. Drugs with serious health implications, such as those used to treat a heart condition, are held to an even stricter standard, requiring proof up to 99% effectiveness. Back to ice cream. What about ice cream and obesity? While it may seem like common sense that it does cause obesity, the fact is that we don't yet know the true strength of the relationship. If we look at the sale of ice cream, there's actually an inverse relationship with weight. People gain weight in the winter when sales are low and lose weight in the warm summer months when more ice cream is being consumed. This might suggest ice cream is the new diet food. Luckily, you now know to be cautious of drawing conclusions of causation from correlation. Instead, recent research on the subject has been looking at different types of sugars used in making a wide range of sweet foods. What scientists have discovered is that the hypothalamus, which is an area of the brain that regulates the human appetite, reacts differently when we consume foods with fructose instead of glucose. This has researchers speculating that eating high fructose foods, such as ice cream, may result in people not feeling full, so they continue to eat. This theory proves difficult, however, when we start considering apples and other natural fruits also contain fructose, not just ice cream and chocolate cake. As you can see, causation is quite a bit different than correlation. Finding correlations is easy, proving causation is hard. No wonder it takes 12 years just to prove that a pill causes hair to grow. The bottom line, on the news, in boardrooms and coffee shops, everywhere you go, you will hear claims that X causes Y. From politics to the weather, from the stock market to personal relationships, it is human nature to try and explain things, to create stories that make sense. Just keep in mind, as you hear a claim of what causes what, that correlation is not causation.
So I hope I've given you a well-rounded view of the field of genetics and its relationship to racism, or how the white supremacists are taking over the conversation when really nothing there is supporting their claims. Now, what I want to leave on is that I have faith in the human species. I don't care what cognitive or behavioral traits you find in my genes or in anybody else's around me. I think we have the ability to achieve equality, and we need to be striving for that. We are all inhabitants of the same earth. Why can we not have the same goals in life and help each other achieve them? So let's do it. All right, I'll see you guys again in another video.